So without further ado, let's get into the business of tonight. We've got Lili-Ann Kriegler here with us, which is, we're very fortunate. I know Lili-Ann because I've been on her podcast previously. We had a lovely conversation. It was really heartwarming. Lili-Ann is an Amazon best-selling author, preschool and primary education consultant, Independent Schools Victoria, and a consultant at the Kriegler-Education. She does wonderful work. She's a wonderful soul. She's written books. She's got another book on the way too. And I meet many people on this thing we call, online education and networking, and a few and far many as nice as you, Lili-Ann Kriegler. So we welcome you with big open arms and open hearts, and I will hand it to you to take it away, and off you go.
Thank you so much. Now, it's just absolutely wonderful to be here online with all of you, and it's fantastic to be part of this LinkedIn community as well. So I have to thank Anusha for the work she's done, and Gavin in putting it together. I came to hear of it when Gavin came on my interview, and it's really very, very exciting to see teachers working together in this way. It's a privilege. Now, Gavin is going to later on talk to you, I think, at a very high overarching level about how you organize teachers, how to keep them happy, to keep those teams positive. And I, on the other hand, am going to be drilling right down to almost a single skill that you can use in the classroom. So it's from the very, very overarching high to literally to one skill. Now, just before I go on, I'd like to ask maybe Yvonne, if you can put your thumbs up if my sound is maybe too loud, because sometimes that can happen, or if it's just okay.
So I just unmuted quickly. The sound is perfect. Thank you so much.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for that. Okay. So without much ado, I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to go to that deathly thing called PowerPoint, but I'll come out of it for a little while in between. So as I said, my talk is going to be about comparison, and believe me, it is the underestimated building block of critical and creative thinking. And whenever I do some teaching, I love to have a mantra. And the mantra I wanted tonight was from Maya Angelou. And Maya Angelou was a civil rights activist, a poet, a truly unbelievably remarkable woman. And I think she'd have a lot to say about what's going on in the world today. But what she said is, if we know better, we can do better. So I like often to just tap my forehead and say, if we know better, and then put your hands up, we can do better. So really, I'm sure that what Gavin will share later and what I'm trying to share is just for us all to have skills and to enhance them over time. So let's work together to build students' brains using great thinking skills. And what might you gain from this presentation this evening? So my wishes for this session are that you will explore the difference between process and content. So whenever children are learning, there are these two things going on. There's the content you're teaching them, but then there's also the way they are processing that content, the information processing. And that's a very different thing from the actual content. So we'll have a look at that briefly. Then we're going to place comparison as a thinking skill in perspective. Where does it fit in? Learn more about comparison. And I know you all compare every 5 seconds every day. So, but it's just to give a new picture of what it is. Think about how you might impart these skills to your students in fun ways. So I'm going to put you through an activity, just quick, because we don't have heaps of time tonight. And then at the end, I'd really love it if you can transfer the skills about comparison, because they're so important to students so they can use them in their everyday lives. That is bridging these skills to everything that they do. So those are the wishes. So where did I acquire my knowledge about this, the art of thinking? And it was from this phenomenal person, Professor Reuven Feuerstein, sadly now passed, but he started the Feuerstein Institute in Jerusalem, and he analyzed thinking and created knowledge and information about thinking that is phenomenally detailed. He was one of the first people in the 20th century to say that human intelligence is not fixed. Every individual has the propensity to significantly improve their ability to learn regardless of age, cultural background, or economic status. I mean, when he went to America in the 1960s and told people this, he was laughed out of rooms because that was when, you know, IQ testing was so rampant. But what they found is when he visited America, they'd give him these small rooms at the conference, but they would fill up so fast and there'd be people out in the corridors trying to hear what he had to say, because not everyone believes, you know, that we can pigeonhole people and label them and say what they like. So what he discovered when he worked with children and enhanced their thinking, that their intelligence actually improved. And they were more and more able to cope with learning and with the world around them. So he took the whole interesting, diverse thing that he's thinking, and he created them, he explained them in just 28 cognitive functions in 3 thinking phases. In the input phase, the elaboration phase, and the output phase. We can't do all of them. We're only doing one. So we are doing comparison, but comparison is one of 28 detailed thinking skills that he has written about and created courses about. So input is everything that comes into our mind through our senses, but I want you to also see that as what is coming into your mind from the memory of what your senses have had before. So it's a combination of what's coming into your mind from inside as well as outside, because all the time children are checking their prior knowledge. So input is prior knowledge and it's what they're experiencing at the moment. Then all of that gets put into the brain, and then there's this elaboration or information processing. And that's where comparison fits in. So comparison is one of these elaboration thinking skills, which helps people to have a look at information and to process it so that they understand what's going on. Once they've done that, then comes the output, and that's their ability to communicate. So part of why I'm sharing this information about comparison is it builds language so that students can communicate about what they are hearing and seeing and learning and thinking. So the language is very important. So I always think it's helpful to distinguish between how we learn, and what we learn. So how we learn is the process. What we learn is the content. So I call it 2-tiered thinking. And you can see it in this picture, I think, a little bit more clearly. So on the left-hand side, you have this little girl working with a mentor or teacher, and she's involved with content, right? So she's got the blocks. It is the letters of the alphabet, so it's all content. But how? What processes is she using to be able to understand what she's seeing? So that is the process. And it's a very, very active thing, and it's a very immediate thing. It's happening right now. So yeah, 2-tier teaching. We want to be aware of teaching content, but also putting our students in touch with what their brains are doing, what their minds are doing to help them. And then one of the things the mind is doing clearly is comparison. So comparing. Now, this is a small spoiler alert for a little brag. So I am going to stop sharing and talk for a second about my book, Edu Chameleon, and I'd like to read a piece from it related to comparison. So I actually come from early childhood, and outside one day on the bench, a little child comes up to me, and I'll show you her picture in a minute. And she stands literally in front of me, eye to eye like this. And she says, "Mrs. Kriegler." But clearly she means Kriegler, right? Not regular. Mrs. Kriegler, I was thinking about making some wings. And I was imagining my sewing machine. And my wings will have some web patterns on them. Then she's quiet for a minute and she stands there looking at my shoulders and my body and my face. And then she says, "I can't lend you them." Clearly not. "But I can make you some. But I will need a much bigger sewing machine." So this sounds like such a simple story, but actually it's quite astounding, because not only has she combined and mobilized all this information, but she's compared my size. You know, she knows what sewing machines can do. She knows that she can't make wings for me on a small one. So it is just phenomenal. She is using comparison from a very early age. But can all children do this? This is called spontaneous comparison, and literally not all children do it. So this is why sometimes it's worth us helping them to work on comparison. So as I disappear again, this is down here. I don't know if you can see when my mouse is going around, but this is Isabella. And she's the child who spoke about the wings. And in fact, we ended up having this amazing, amazing project about wings that went on for months and months. And we eventually had to bring this fairy in, obviously very life-size, for a project. But this all happened because of Isabella's statements to me in the playground. So now I'm going to put you through a little activity, right? And I'm going to give you a collection of things to have a look at. It's going to be very simple. But before I even show you what it is, I want you to think of this collection of things as a metaphor for any problem that you would put in front of students, whether it's a math problem, an engineering problem, no matter what it is, it's always a collection of different things that have to be sorted out. So, you know, if you're teaching geography, maybe this is about rocks. If you're teaching math, maybe this is about fractions. But as it is, it's about a bunch of toys. Okay, so I'm going to give you just a minute or two to look over these objects and try and sort them in your mind. I'll just be absolutely quiet and you have a look for a couple of minutes. See if you can find any headings for this stuff. So is anyone interested in coming off mute and just sharing a little bit about what they're thinking?
Okay,
Alexander.
I'll take this.
Alexander,
Yes.
right.
Alexander's there. Yes, I knew he'd be answering.
Yeah. Okay, yes, Gavin. Thank you, Lili-Ann. Thank you so much, everybody. So from what I am seeing, or in my own perspective, I can group these into 3 or 4. First of all, we have a cup, we have a toothbrush, and a paste. And we take that as a group, which could be group 1. And then group 2 will also be the working tools, as we have the plier, and as well we have the saw for cutting, and then also the machinery as well. And then that will be group 2. And then group 3 is going to be the teddy bears that I'm seeing right here. So we have 4 teddy bears, right? And then as well, I can see a cactus plant. 2 of the plants can also be grouped. So in all, we have 4 different groups of items. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, you've actually nailed it. And you've had a look and made those decisions based on a few things. And I'm sure that others in the group will agree with you. So if you do agree with Alexander, just put your thumbs up. And you know, he's done a great job. So let's just think about it. You know, which processes did you use in this exercise? So you've determined that there's some cacti, and they would go into a category maybe called plants, or even before that, you know, xerophytes, which are plants which don't need a lot of water. So what have you used? What thinking skill, you know, what are your group headings, and how did you decide to put those objects in those groups? And as I said, we could be giving students a much more complex task than this, and they'd have to use the same process. So let's have a look at what some other teachers have said in the past about this. So they've said that when you do this, you have to make assumptions. You have to, you know, it's a very quick process. You start to immediately see how things are matching. You use your memory to sort things. You sort things out quick as you can. You choose common features. And I heard Alexander doing that. You make connections, you're categorizing, you're finding an alternative group. This doesn't fit in here. Now we need to put it somewhere else. You're looking at all the details. You're deciding on a rationale or a reason for grouping. You're looking for similarities and differences, and you're asking yourself questions. So all of these are important processes. So if we look at, you know, and I think Alexander told us these were all tools. What are the similarities? That the fact that they're tools is a similarity, but also, you know, the color. So what you want students to ask yourself is, which is the most important commonality? Because sometimes, like when they're doing maths or fractions, they might choose to focus on something that's not the most important thing. So it's pretty irrelevant that these things are yellow and gray. You know, it's attractive, but it's pretty irrelevant. So it's getting students, when they're doing the comparison, to choose the very relevant information. Now, Anusha, if you'll let me know if I'm going on for too long, or how much time I have left, just so I can
As long as you like, Lili-Ann, no problem.
Oh, you sweet. Thank you, Gavin. All right. So here are 3 more groups, which also Alexander, in his wisdom, managed to isolate. And we also have to look at these and see, like, which is the most important commonality? Is it the fact that these things are made of plastic? Are the colors important? Or is the function important? So again, it's just a situation of surfacing and percolating up the most relevant things. Again, the similarities, they're all animals, but some are for the ocean, some are for the jungle, some are for the plains, and some are for the kangaroo belongs here in Australia with me. So yeah, how we sort these things out is really important. And, you know, if they get this big collection, sometimes they might choose the wrong reason for putting them together. So we're wanting them to sift that and to get some very fine thinking around it. So what I'm hoping that's been consolidated during this little mini experience is that you get a feel for this process of comparison, deciding on the criteria for comparison, how comparison is the basis for categories, and finding the nearest, most important level of generalization. You know, where the cacti is the next best step. Plants in general, is it, you know, just non-living things or living things? So you want it to be the closest you can so that children can move up those fine distinctions. So comparison is both a single thinking skill, we do it automatically, but it's made up of this collection of discrete skills. So students need to observe, to name and label, and this is really important. If it's something new, they have to learn the new language for it. If it's, maybe it's electromagnetism, right? They have to learn about coils and copper and all kinds of other things. Name and label. Isolate the criteria. What are you comparing with what? Use accuracy and precision, and then compare two or more elements and apply the criteria. So remember the child with the wings? She looked at herself first, target A, and looked at me, target B, and said, you are bigger. You need bigger wings. You need a bigger sewing machine. She applied the criteria of size and functionality. So then you've got to come to a conclusion. How are you going to use this information? And, you know, when you sort any collection, you can place those elements into categories. So with this bunch of buttons, there are categories here: color, shape, size, texture, reflection or shininess, number. Can you see the number? The number of holes is different on different buttons. The thickness, the design elements, the color variations, the pattern, the function, orientation, all of these things are criteria and they can become categories. So if you have a category color, you will separate this collection in different ways. So depending on the criteria, you decide on different categories, and it helps children to organize their thinking. So there are a couple of models to help us to compare, and the one is the good old Venn diagram. Are they completely different or are they partly similar? So conceptualization of identical, similar, and different. We want our kids to nail this. So at the top, those buttons are identical. In the middle, they're similar. They have the same shape, the same number of buttons, but they're variations. And finally, at the bottom, they're two things completely different. But we also get comparison on like a continuum, you know, a gradation of difference. And this is where it's sometimes quite tricky for children. So in this example, we've got degrees of blue from light to dark. So that's much more difficult to describe. And imagine if this was like a character analysis of characters, and you had to decide on criteria of who was more friendly, who was more criminal, who was more this, you know, and which is the most important thing. So importance is another thing which you can look at on a continuum, and relevance and, you know, validity. How true is this? We have to think about this all the time. So any comparison requires the thinker to identify features and criteria, and understanding is often based on how the features are equivalent, similar, or different, and to what extent. But it's not a single cognitive function. It's a battery of integrated functions working together. And I want to show you this last little piece over here. So I've got these two goldfish. Is this a bit comical? There's a kind of strangeness happening here. So what I wanted to show you in this next slide is there's this process, and it's linked to the content. So the table is set up so, you know, this, can you see the little, my cursor going around or not?
Yeah, we can see your mouse.
Okay, all right, cool. So this little area relates to this area opposite, okay? So when we compare, we use verbal tools to label the targets of the comparison. So that means I see two fish in two bowls. Then spontaneously observing the similarities and differences. So what do we notice? One fish is bigger than the other, and the two bowls are the same size. Then we want some more precision and accuracy in the communication. So I can't read this anymore, but it says, I can see a bowl and a large fish. So that, I think it's like there's a small fish in a bowl and a large fish in the same size bowl of water. Then we go, you have to consider more than one source of information. So I need to look at, with these fish, the size, the shape, the volume, and the space. I have to select relevant cues in defining the problem. So the problem is defined because the bowl size is the same, but the fish are not. So that's my problem. Then communicating a clear evaluation and a conclusion, what I decide is the bowl is not adequate for the large fish, therefore the large fish needs a larger environment. So comparison is like one big thing, but you also have to do all these other little mini things when you are doing it. And sometimes you have to compare one whole system of things with a whole system of other things. So in this ridiculous picture, the cat is inside the bowl and the fish is floating around in the air on the outside. So to understand why this is ridiculous, we have to know everything about cats. That's why you've got a cat system and you have to compare it with a goldfish system. And you know that goldfish can't live in air. You know that that cat's going to drown. So you're comparing a whole system of information against another whole system. And what I'm asking you to do, this little chat, is to help students to bridge this information and transfer it somewhere else. What do we want them to transfer? We want them to transfer the language of comparison, that methodology, use all like 6 pieces of it, identify criteria, to identify categories, and to transfer those thinking skills. Also, to transfer the ability to deal with complexity. If you can find criteria, if you can make categories, it's much easier to start finding out what is target A, what is target B, what's the most relevant criterion, how do I do it, what is my conclusion. So it helps you to deal with things which are very complicated. And where can we use this information? So we can use it, you can see the ripple effect. You can use it externally, so students can go beyond this thinking skill and use it in the classroom for math, geography, on the sports field, knowing what they did last time and how they can improve, what this opponent did this time and how they can next time avoid the fact that they kicked the goal or whatever. And when they're out and about, selecting clothing, getting on a bus, etc. But also internally, in their own mind, you want them to use this comparison. So decision-making, problem-solving, and creativity. This is where they can also use this comparative process and be much more efficient at doing these complex thinking skills like decisions, problems, and creating. Thank you for listening. And there's so many ways to keep in contact with me. So as I mentioned right at the beginning, Ortal Green and Ortal's also on LinkedIn, and I think she's also on this Education Influence. She has a profile. So we have a podcast called The Thinking Effect, and that is my website, very easy, www.Kriegler-Education.com with the hyphen. But also you can find me on this platform. And when I find out how from Anusha, I will give you a resource on this platform, which is an article about comparison, which goes into it, in a little bit of a different way. But thank you so much for your attention.